Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
Welcome. It is the week of, let's see here, the last week of February. Boy, we're wrapping things up very quickly here on, again, we're kind of taking some abbreviated breaks here for Weather Weekly, waiting till we get fully staffed, which we should be here heading into the beginning of March. We're looking forward to Chief Meteorologist Ashley Brown coming back from maternity leave then. She was my first guest here on Weather Weekly, if you want to check that out. And we're looking forward to kind of getting fully staffed and getting back in the swing of things here on this podcast. If you remember the last one we had, we kind of went back in the archives. We talked about the blizzard of 78 with Stan Wood and Mike Ahern. That was an old interview back from 2012, but kind of talking more about the anniversary of the blizzard of 78, the benchmark snowstorm. And here we are as we kind of go ahead and jump into what we missed while we were away weather-wise across the country, coming off our biggest snow event so far, not only for this winter season, but really the biggest winter event, snow event that we've had in Indianapolis in about the last 3 years. It's been a long time, but anywhere between 7 inches of snow to almost as high as 12 inches. I think the highest report we had from our Monday system, that would have been on, let's see here, February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, that we picked up on that major snow. 11.8 inches was the highest number I saw down in Franklin and Johnson County, and it just kind of shut things down Monday night and into early Tuesday morning. Lots of school cancellations that went on for a few days. Roads were pretty tough to travel. I know coming home Monday night, I think I got home about 3 a.m. Tuesday morning, and the interstates were in not good shape. But you know what? Things got cleared up fairly quickly, and we were back to normal within a day. And here we are a week later. We hit 50s on this Tuesday that we're recording this here, February 23rd. And it was the first 50 of the year. And it had been 57 days since the last time we actually hit 50 degrees. It's the 12th longest stretch between 50-degree days in Indianapolis history. So it was a long time coming. A lot of ups and downs. Of course, this winter system that we had early on last week, right after Valentine's Day, big newsmaker, not only here in Indiana because it was a big snow, but obviously the problems that they had with the power outages, the just unusual severe cold down in Texas. At one point, we had about 73% of the United States was covered in snow. I believe 48 out of 50 states were covered with snow. Florida, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head, did not have snow, but pretty much every other state had at least a little bit of snow on the ground. So it was just an incredible event for much of the country as we kind of went into the deep freeze. It's interesting, though, and I've mentioned this on the air, if you are able to watch Wish TV, and I've been working evenings filling in for Ashley the past few weeks, but brought it up this week because of the warm-up that we had. Really, the last 2 weeks, we went about 14 days straight here in Indianapolis of failing to reach the freezing mark. So we stayed below freezing for 14 days straight. But that was kind of the anomaly leading up to the cold, which kind of started on February 7th. We had been warmer than average for the most part. No real significant big shots of cold that stuck around for very long. And then obviously we were well below average in terms of snow until the big snow hit us. And now we're right around where we should be for this time of year. So very interesting how quickly things can change. And now the pattern does look to kind of quiet things down. And it looks like, at least here for the medium range, excuse me, that we're going to be kind of staying on the warmer side of things here for the next couple of weeks or so. So we'll keep an eye on that. So that was really what kind of happened while we were away in terms of any major or significant weather events. Got a real good interview here for you as we just kind of passed the 6-month anniversary of the just big time Derecho event that happened over the summer. It really impacted Iowa mostly. It went over several states. Kind of started in the Central Plains in the Dakotas, rolled through Iowa, parts of Wisconsin, Illinois, even Indiana. Northern Indiana was impacted by this Derecho event. Derecho is a long line of severe thunderstorms that creates a severe wind event over several miles, several hours. And this was utterly devastating in Iowa. And a good friend of mine, former intern of Wish TV, she is a native of Westfield, Indiana as well, Ball State University graduate, was in the thick of it during this event. And so I reached out to her just because I figured it'd be great to just hear her perspective on how they forecasted the upcoming event, because that's obviously a unique event. You don't get derechos a lot, especially derechos of that magnitude. And then basically just kind of how the day went in her eyes in terms of just how everything unfolding. Those kind of events can just unravel very quickly when you're talking a long line of severe wind gusts. So just, yeah, it was pretty devastating. So we're going to dive more into this. My guest for this week on Weather Weekly, Kalie Pluchel of KCRG in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. She will be my guest next here on Weather Weekly. Welcome back to this week's episode of Weather Weekly. This week, we have a fun one here, an interesting subject here about derechos. We had a pretty significant one here over the Midwest in August of 2020. I know a lot of things were going on that year, but this was a significant weather event. And one of my friends, a meteorologist out in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Kalie Pluchel, was in the heart of all of that. So we're going to bring her on, meteorologist at KCRG, an overall awesome person. Hi, Kalie.
Hello.
It's good to have you here. Before we kind of get started here on that day, tell me a little bit about yourself. You are a Hoosier,
Yes.
and spent most of your life in Indiana before you kind of got into the TV business. So tell me a little bit about where you're from and kind of how you got interested in being a meteorologist on television.
Yeah, so I am from Westfield, Indiana, on the north side of Indianapolis. My parents actually still live there, and I visit quite often, as much as I can nowadays. And my journey led me first with weather to Westfield High School. They actually offered a meteorology course at my high school. It's just a quick 45-minute class that we had for one trimester, and one of the science teachers taught it, and it was a super cool class. It was very obviously basic weather concepts, clouds, things like that. And I remember coming home from school one day, and I just kept talking about all these cloud types. And I was out in the car with my mom pointing out all these clouds, and she goes, "Man, Kalie," she goes, "do you like looking at weather and like talking about it?" And I was like, "I guess." She goes, "Well, why don't we look into it? Maybe you can go to school for it." And I was like, "You can go to school and study weather?" I had no idea. And so we ended up looking up some stuff, and I was worried that I was going to go to college and change my mind, change my major, things like that. So I ended up choosing Ball State University, which I know Marcus and I share that.
Excellent choice, an excellent choice.
Chirp.
That's right.
And so I ended up going to Ball State. It was a school that had meteorology, had a great program there, but also had great programs in other things I was interested, just in case I decided to change my mind at all. So I ended up going through Ball State, and I feel like I'm one of those people that I didn't have a very traumatic childhood experience with a tornado or a hurricane, and I just really fell in love with the science of meteorology as I went through school. So I started off, with the basic classes at Ball State. I got involved at the radio station on campus, the TV station right away, trying to get practice as much as possible because I knew the route that I wanted to take for the most part was going to be broadcast. And so I just really got involved early, and the more and more I took classes, the more I got interested in it, and I just wanted to learn more. And I'm still like that today. I feel like I'm still constantly learning about stuff, and that's the nice thing that I like about weather is that it's always different, and there's always something new to learn, and it's never going to stay the same. It always changes every single day. So I always find it super interesting. Once I graduated from Ball State, I graduated December 2017, so about 3 years ago now. My journey took me to Louisiana, so a completely different climate section of the United States than what I was used to. I wanted to get out of the Midwest, study somewhere else, and so that's where it took me. And I ended up interning with Marcus at Wish TV before I did that, and then I also interned in Memphis, Tennessee. So I kind of already traveled a little bit, so I knew I was ready for the step to go down to Louisiana. I tracked quite a bit of tropical weather, a little bit of winter weather that we had one day. I think there was a tiny bit of snow, and quite a bit of severe weather. So I got a lot of experience with that. Got a little homesick, so decided to transfer within my company, and now I'm here in Cedar Rapids, and I've been here for almost 2 years now. It'll be 2 years in May, which is crazy to think. Seems like time is flying by.
I know. Well, you're telling me because how old am I feeling when, all these interns now are talking about, I'm coming up on 3, 4, 5 years of television broadcast. I'm like, weren't you just here yesterday, helping me put the blog together? It feels like that anyway. But Kalie,
I know, it really does.
Kalie won't admit this, but she was one of the best interns we ever had. Not just because she's incredibly smart and a very hard worker, and it shows in her on-air work, but she's one of the few people that have ever actually volunteered to come on my shift, which is weekend mornings. So you get extra props for that. I don't play favorites. I love all the interns that have always come through Wish TV.
Well, of course.
But I mean, you do get some props for that. So I always give you love.
I did. And I enjoyed coming on weekend mornings. That was when Drew Blair was on weekend mornings. We had such a great time. I mean, I was half asleep, to be honest.
Well, you know what? Join the club. So were both of us. So you were in good company.
But no, I loved it. It was during the spring semester, so I was going to school during the week, coming home on the weekends, and hanging out with you guys on weekend mornings.
Yeah.
And learned quite a bit throughout the entire semester.
Kalie's also, so you interned here. You were down in Memphis, which I actually got to go down to Memphis. What would have been a year and a half ago for a wedding. First time I ever been there. Awesome city. Great barbecue, by the way. Best ribs I've ever had down there.
Yes.
You also met, am I remembering this correctly? You went out to New York and met Ginger Z, didn't you?
I did. So when I was in college, like I said, I always wanted to learn more. So when I was in college, I always wanted feedback on my weather forecasts. So they were always saved on YouTube with the TV station, and I would email people constantly, meteorologists all across the country. Pamela Gardner, who used to work at Wish TV, I would email her out. I actually visited her in Boston as well
when
I was out there. But I just wanted to learn everything that I could from mentors across the United States before I went into the field because I wanted to be prepared. I'm a huge planner, so I wanted to be prepared. So I did. I just shot Ginger Z an email one day, and my mom goes, "What's going to hurt? She may just not reply." And I'm like, "You're right. I mean, it won't be that big of a deal." But literally, I'm not even kidding you, probably within 24 hours, I got a reply. She gave me multiple paragraphs telling me good things about my reel, things I should look for with outfits on TV, things like that. And then she was like, "Hey, if you're ever in New York City, let me know and you can stop by."
Wow.
So I decided to make my way to New York City from Indiana for a trip with my parents. We went there for a couple of days. The trip was centered around that, but we did some other things as well. So I was able to shadow her on Good Morning America. So we were able to go in the studio. That was before Good Morning America had a live studio.
Okay.
I think they implemented that right after we did it. So we were the only ones in there besides the whole entire crew. We got to go to the outside set, which was super cool. And you got to see what she did on a national level, which is extremely different than local news. And that was something that I wanted to see because I like knowing a lot of things. And it was so different. They have a team of meteorologists that forecast for the entire United States because obviously she can't do it on her own. and they sit there and build graphics. You know, she comes in, she does her thing. She's got other stuff she's got to do after the show, and it was just a wild experience. My parents and I even talk about it today, that it just seems like a blur of like a couple days. We did so much in New York City. None of us had ever been before. And the fact that we got to go onto a set of a national TV show and really be able to talk to a amazing female meteorologist who's really led females into meteorology and science was just an awesome experience. And I know a lot of people who've met Ginger in meteorology and things like that, and she is just as genuine as she seems on TV. Super nice, super helpful. I guarantee you if I would send her an email today, I'd be like, hey, I got an updated video. You know, I've been in the field for a couple years. Would you mind looking at it? I guarantee you she would send me an email back. She's just that nice of a person, which
That's
is
awesome.
Amazing to see.
That's all. And if there's any young people that are listening to this that are in college, I think it's an important lesson to learn from you, and that is networking in this business is so key.
Yes.
You had that hunger to just want to learn. You probably didn't initially think, oh, I want to just meet all these people because they're in TV. You naturally just wanted to see what it was like in all these different places, which is great. But, I mean, that can pay dividends later down the line. I mean, and that will carry on through your career. I mean, think about the people that you met here at Wish TV. Think about the people that you met in Memphis. There's probably going to be at some point in your career in television that you are going to cross paths with somebody, either directly or indirectly. So it's such a good thing to like, and you caught on that early on. And I don't think a lot of young people do. A lot of young people just kind of want to get to it, get a resume reel and get going. But, you know, if you want to kind of make it to where you eventually want to be, wherever that is, in this business, knowing people sometimes is half the battle. So I think that's really cool that you took the initiative.
It really is. And I know I keep talking about, since I've moved back here to Iowa, that I've really come full circle. I went to a conference, the Severe Storms Conference in Iowa. It's held in Ames, I believe. And when I was in college, and with a group of students from Ball State, we took Ball State University white vans out and drove all the way to Iowa into this conference. That's where I actually met one of the meteorologists that I interned under in Memphis. So I met a ton of people there. I took a bunch of business cards. I emailed a ton of people that summer and was like, hey, I'm looking for an internship. And they're the ones that replied and was like, hey, you want to move to Memphis for the summer? And I said, sure, never been to Memphis. Didn't know anybody in Memphis, took a shot, and that internship led to my job in Louisiana, and obviously my job in Louisiana led me here. So it's wild how things kind of come back around and how just knowing one person can kind of really help throughout your entire career. It's really interesting to now see that I've been in it for a couple of years, how it can kind of come back around.
Well, and trust me, because I've been doing it now I'll be going on 15 years in October.
Wow.
Oh, thanks.
Marcus.
Thanks. Wow. Yeah. Thanks. But it's, you know, I mean, it's the same thing, except for it's just obviously a much longer duration. It's just like all of it's like pieces of a puzzle that just kind of get put together and stuff like that. But it's also interesting too. It's, you know, in the same sense, it's because it's such a small community. When you really look at it, the television meteorologist community is very tiny across the country.
It is.
That I've had interns that have come through here that are looking for jobs, and I'm able to reach out to people that I used to work with because I know they have openings and say, hey, you should look at so-and-so, they intern with me. And it's like word of mouth, and then they trust you or whatever. And they're like, yes, we will look at them. And it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to hire that person because of that, but it definitely helps to kind of get you in the door and stuff like that. It's just, it's crazy how it all kind of just plays out and all the puzzle pieces going to get put together. But it's cool. And I'm glad that you've you've jumped on that even in your short time in this career. You've realized that. And I think that's huge, and I think that's why you've been doing so well over just the last couple of years. So let's talk about, speaking of a short career, you've already had kind of a generational event, you know, in your short time. So what we're talking about today on the podcast is the August 10th, correct? August 10th?
Yep, August 10th.
August 10th, 2020, Derecho. And I'll let Kalie kind of dive in on because I'm sure she's ad nauseum has had to get in explainers on exactly what a derecho is and all that kind of stuff. But this was a super significant event across numerous states, but more significant in Iowa. And really, kind of looking back on some of the studies, it was most significant kind of around your area. So before we kind of get into the actual day, because you're going to have to kind of refresh my memory a little bit, I remember kind of looking at things, and it did look like it was going to be a pretty active day leading up to it. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to think like it kind of started off as like a slight risk, and then as they got closer, the risks just increased as you got like each day closer to the actual event. Am I incorrect in saying that?
No, so it's like that meme, that escalated quickly.
Right.
That's literally exactly what happened. So I had worked the Sunday night, so I was working weekends at the time, and I was on the Sunday night show before the event happened. And actually that Sunday night before, we only had, I believe, a marginal risk out,
okay.
Which anybody who's not familiar, marginal is one of the lower end threats of the SPC outlook. And so when I left Sunday night, to be honest, and what we had been saying all weekend, the models had been all over the place. Mm-hmm. It was raining when it wasn't supposed to be raining. It was dry when it was supposed to be raining and thunderstorming. It was literally a disaster of a weather weekend from a forecasting standpoint. And when I had left Sunday, I remember writing my forecast email to the weather team and was like, well, I think it's going to thunderstorm tomorrow, but everything's still like all over the place. Like nothing was consistent, even like 12, 18 hours, 24 hours out, which is wild to think in the world that we live in now, obviously now 2021, then 2020, that things even that short term can still be so, unknown.
Right.
And I think that's a hard thing for, especially when we're trying to explain to viewers, after this happens, like, why it was so unknown and that type of thing. And these are types of events that just don't get picked up well on models. They're very short-term events that a lot of times can be hard to be picked up on, more global, more long-term models because they just don't pick up on that type of energy and instability and all those types of things that go into severe weather. So I remember leaving Sunday night being like, yeah, I think it's going to thunderstorm in like the afternoon, but like it'll be fine. Like, you just think we live in this severe weather market. I mean, even
sure.
Indiana, it thunderstorms, you get severe weather, you get tornadoes, things like that. It's very common in these areas. So it wasn't an abnormal weekend forecasting for anything. We just knew there were going to be thunderstorms, and it ended up being an extreme disaster and one of the costliest thunderstorm disasters now looking back at it, which is crazy. It's been a crazy experience. Actually, February 10th marks the 6-month anniversary
wow.
of it, which is wild.
Sure. Well, I mean, and it in some cases, just because I think it's 2020, it seems like it was, a few months ago. And in other ways, it feels like it was 5 years ago that happened because so much has happened then. So we always make this joke as meteorologists that, sometimes when you see models, you said models really struggle with this event. And I don't know if any models ever do well with a derecho type event because there's always the joke in the casual listener won't get this, but meteorologists will. Whenever you see something that may show signals of a derecho, you just say, don't say the D word. Because it gets overused sometimes. Be like, oh, it's a possible derecho event. And I guess we should kind of go in depth on what the definition of a derecho is. Do you want to take that? Because you've probably handled a lot more than I have the last year.
Yeah, so the thing that we've had to try to explain to people with is derecho is a word that people aren't familiar with.
Right.
People, know what a tornado is.
Yes.
They know what a thunderstorm is. They know what hurricanes are, things like this. But a derecho is just one of those words that's just not very common. It's not used very much because it's an event that doesn't happen every day. It doesn't happen every summer in the same location. Now, it may happen in the United States every day, but, you're not moving around wherever derecho hits. So for something to be a derecho, it has to be at severe thunderstorm criteria winds, which is 74 miles per hour, I believe. Has to have those sustained type of damaging winds for a certain amount of distance. I'm blanking on the amount of distance it is, but it's hundreds of miles that it has to
It's
go.
a long duration.
So technically, when you're talking about, the storm that hit here in Cedar Rapids, yes, it is a derecho because we figured that out after the fact. But technically, when it hit here, it was not a derecho because it hadn't gone the span of the distance. So if we're going specific, which I like to do, the viewers aren't going to understand that. But technically, when it hit us, it was just the beginning of the derecho because then it went through, the rest of Iowa. It went through Illinois, Chicago, and even went all the way to Fort Wayne, Indiana. I think even portions of Ohio. So this was an extremely long duration event with extremely high damaging winds for an extremely long period of time. So this was something that started out in the Dakotas, like early Monday morning, continued to move through all the way through like late Monday, early Tuesday in Ohio. So it's a long duration event. It has to have those damaging winds at a certain speed, and it has to travel a certain amount of distance for it to be classified as a derecho. And something that we've had to explain as well is we had extremely high winds here in the city of Cedar Rapids, but not all derechos are that extreme.
Right.
So that's the other thing is when you're doing research on past ones, which we've done now, because we actually did have one hit near our area in Vinton, Iowa, back in 2011. And the people who live in Vinton vividly remember that because the whole landscape has changed. And now this is something in Cedar Rapids where they're now experiencing that, and the landscape has changed here as well. So it's a nasty, nasty storm. And coming from Louisiana, I obviously tracked a lot of severe weather. They have severe weather all year round there. I tracked storms on Christmas to the summertime to fall, whenever. And I tracked multiple large tornadoes. I chased them in storm vehicles and things like that. And I would say this derecho that I went through was nothing. Like the storms in Louisiana were nothing compared to this one. It was a very wild, crazy, insane day, and really a couple weeks after that, because it was almost like you were in shock for weeks afterwards, because everything that you knew about the landscape and people's homes, businesses, things like that were destroyed. Just gone. And a lot of people keep calling it the land hurricane because it did have such strong winds, upwards of what you can compare to a Category 2 hurricane. Now, land hurricane, not a scientific term. It is the derecho. But I can understand why people are comparing it to that because of the high winds. Because when you think about, a Category 2 hurricane hitting Florida or Louisiana, anywhere along the Gulf Coast, that's a major storm to hit the area. And that's really the wind speeds we experience here inland in the state of Iowa. So it's something that you can't quite imagine until you experience it. It's one of those things where you're thinking like 140 mile per hour winds, like in the state of Iowa. That can't be right. But it happened, and it was insane.
Some of just going over the Weather Service's numbers on their overview that they published in September. 106 mile per hour wind in La Grande. Marshalltown at 99 mile per hour wind speed. And it has a map that shows that there were reports just west of Cedar Rapids of 120 plus. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to fathom that kind of wind speed unless you're actually in it. But I want to talk more about your experience in the event in a second. So you went from that Sunday night of forecasting. You said that this complex kind of started in the Dakotas. When did you realize that as a weather team, this is not going to be good? Like, because if it did seem like it just, like you said, it escalated quickly. And if you look at it on a map perspective, the Dakotas is not far away from Iowa. So it didn't travel very far. And from the timetable I think I'm looking at here on the maps, I mean, this was kind of like an impact late morning, early afternoon. Am I right? From when that actually hit?
Yeah. So I was actually off on that Monday.
Okay.
Monday, Tuesdays were my off days at the time, and our morning meteorologist was actually off. So our other weekend meteorologist was filling in. And from when I've talked to him multiple times about this, obviously we've had plenty of time to talk about it. Mm-hmm. He kind of saw things forming while he was forecasting, and then he tracked the whole thing from the Dakotas through when it hit Cedar Rapids. He was doing morning and midday, so he was there by himself until our chief came in when things started to get worse. And he came in that morning, and I'm pretty sure we only had a slight risk out for our area, which, again, slight risks happen all the time
right.
for your weather season.
Yes.
They're not uncommon by any means. Mm-hmm. And again, thunderstorms aren't uncommon in Iowa in the summer. And they did a mid-morning update, I believe, or like a later morning one, like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. They upgraded it again. And then all of a sudden they did like a special one, and it was upgraded again. And by then we were in the moderate risk, I believe.
Okay.
We didn't go high risk, but we went moderate. And when things got real for me was I went and worked out that morning because, again, like I said, when I left Sunday night, I was like, oh, it's going to thunderstorm.
Sure.
I'll get my stuff done in the morning. Whatever, it's fine. So I go work out in the morning. I come back. I'm just hanging out. I get an alert on my phone that says a PDS watch has been issued. And for those who don't know what a PDS watch is, it is a particularly dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. Those types of watches don't get issued often.
Right.
They are set aside for extremely dangerous events, reason why the name particularly dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. I've now gone through two now in my short career here. And the last time was when I was in Louisiana. It was devastating. We had like a multiple tornado outbreak. It was horrible. So when I saw that get issued, my heart dropped.
Sure. Because
I knew something bad was going to happen. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew it was not going to be good. And that's when I had texted my chief. Obviously, we're in the middle of the pandemic at this point. And I was like, hey, what do you need from me today? I just saw the PDS watch get issued. He goes, I'm heading in now. He goes, why don't you just do some social media updates from home? We can log into our graphics from home and things like that. And so he was like, we're just going to have you, you don't need to come in here. Like, it's not a big deal. We'll just have you do stuff from home. And by the time I got all my computers set up, I got logged in, I started to get some updates out. I had been working for like an hour, and it hit. So it was something where you feel like there was a lot of time, and then all of a sudden it was like time was running out. Mm-hmm. And you're trying to get the messaging out because now we've been tracking it all morning. Obviously, I'm coming in the middle of it, trying to get some social media posts out there. By the time I try to get some posts out, now the tornado sirens are going off outside. And people are, asking why the tornado sirens are going off, like, is a tornado going to hit, things like that. I got up a post about how the reason why the tornado sirens go off, which for those who don't know, when there's a certain high speed of wind coming, they will sound the alarms as well. Okay. So they're not necessarily always for tornadoes, but it can be for extremely high wind events as well. So by the time I got that Facebook post up about why the sirens were going off and that people still needed to take shelter like it was a tornado, my power was out. And which meant I have no internet. Right. I couldn't do anything from home. I lost signal on my phone too. I was able to get one text out to my chief saying, like, my power's out, I can't get anything out. And he's like, no problem, don't worry about it. And to put it in perspective, my power did not come back on for 6.5 more days.
6.5 days.
Yes.
My goodness. Oh, wow.
And the thing is me thinking back on it, so 6.5 days was an extremely long time. Sure. And I was one of the lucky ones to have my power back after 6.5 days. There were people without power for weeks. And even now, just like talking about it, just makes my heart drop because you just had no idea what was happening because a lot of times, the power goes out. You're like, okay, maybe out for like an hour or so. I'll come back on.
Right.
So I kept waiting and waiting. Power wouldn't come back on. Like I said, I lost phone signal. The whole entire communications system got knocked out. All cell phone towers were knocked out. I couldn't get on Twitter. I couldn't get on Facebook. I couldn't see any coverage. I couldn't log in to try to watch our coverage on TV. I couldn't get anything. So I really didn't know what happened truly until I was able to get into work the next morning on Tuesday. Obviously, I can look out my window and see that there's some, trees falling down across the street and there's leaves everywhere, or whatever. But the extent of the damage I didn't realize until almost 24 hours later, because you just couldn't get any information.
Right.
Which, again, in 2020 seems insane. How connected we are, to the world, to online, to everything. The fact that our whole entire communication system for a major city, we're the second largest city in the state of Iowa, is crazy.
Yeah.
Is crazy. And I really don't know how I lived 6.5 days without power, but we made it work. But I will tell you, it's extremely tough, and there might have been quite a few tears involved.
I'm sure.
But yeah.
You with that kind of wind speed, and I've seen some of the photos, and you really weren't able to kind of check everything out until the next day. What did your city look like following this event? I mean, because I guess in perspective, 120 mile per hour plus wind you can get from a tornado, but in the difference of this as opposed to, a tornado as opposed to a derecho or straight line wind event, this is obviously going to cover more areas. So I'm assuming there's going to be much more widespread damage. Am I right?
Yeah, there was. And to put it in perspective, like I said, Cedar Rapids is not a small city. It's the second largest city in the state of Iowa. And every corner of the city sustained extreme damage. Every single corner of the city. And that includes outside of Cedar Rapids, too, so surrounding communities, other counties like Marshall County, things like that. Benton County also sustained a lot of damage. I mean, there were cornfields, like miles and miles of cornfields just completely smashed and flattened, gone in an instant. And you have to think these are things people work for all year. It's their livelihood. And it's all gone in an hour. And it just, I remember I had tried to get out Monday because I knew the station had generators and my phone was dying. And I was like, maybe I can try to get there and at least charge my phone tonight so then I can come home. And every route that I tried to take to work, which I have multiple ways I can get to work, around 3 or 4 ways that I can get to work, every major road was blocked by large trees that had been just snapped. Just absolutely snapped on the roadways. And I'm literally picturing my drive in my head right now, because it's one of those days that, as any type of person, you will never forget.
Sure.
And it's those images that just will be burned in my brain. And it was, for the couple days afterwards, it was almost like you were getting some sort of like flashbacks from it, because I sat here in my apartment and without power, without communication, like I couldn't get radar data. And as a meteorologist, like I felt helpless.
Sure.
Because normally as a meteorologist, you're in the studio, you're covering it, you're in the radar, you're kind of distracted from it because you're so into covering it. And this system was so different for me because I just had to sit here and watch it happen. And I remember I have a large window that faces west and a forest that sits across the street. And I was worried the entire time because the winds were coming directly from the west. All I kept thinking was, is a huge tree is going to break and just come flying through the window. And the rain was so heavy, the winds were so high that I couldn't see a few feet out the window because it was just so, the visibility was so low. I couldn't see the building across the street from me. The visibility was so low, and it was like, if this tree's going to come into this window, I'm never going to see it coming. And living in an apartment building, I don't have a basement to go to. Luckily, I live on the first floor. but I just had to like back myself up in the furthest corner that I could and hope that nothing was going to happen. But yeah, I remember driving, and the thing when you think about Cedar Rapids is a lot of the trees that we lost were hundreds of years old. Oh. And the way that arborists have put it is, okay, you have a gust of 80, 90 miles per hour for a couple minutes. Trees at any age can kind of withstand that.
Sure.
But to put it in perspective, you've got sustained winds of 90 to 120 miles per hour for an hour straight, for 60-plus minutes straight. And those trees just kind of like, you think of little kids can just like tumble around, and right. not really get hurt. But, you're 50 years old, you can't just tumble around anymore.
Right.
You start breaking bones and things like that. It's the same thing with trees. Mm-hmm. So a lot of our smaller, shorter trees, younger trees didn't get hurt because they can withstand the wind. But majority of the trees we lost were older trees because they just couldn't withstand it for that amount of time at that high of wind speed. And for a city that's never experienced anything like this, we had a lot of older trees.
Sure.
And now we don't. You drive around today and there's a empty field that's by the river, Cedar River, that goes downtown Cedar Rapids, which anybody who's familiar with Cedar Rapids, they had the big flood of 2008
right.
that actually flooded the city. And so this big field that sits there actually used to be a neighborhood of houses that the houses got completely destroyed in the flood. So now it just sits empty because they can't put houses anymore because it's in the flood area. Mm-hmm. So this large field now is full of tree debris.
Wow.
And has been full of tree debris for 6 months. And it's not the same tree debris. It's new tree debris coming in every single day, being mulched and being cut up and being taken away, and more trees just keep filling it every single day.
So this is 6 months after the fact, and there's still lots of cleanup that's going on.
Yeah, we are 6 months out from the derecho, and I would say we are getting there, but it is going to take an extremely long time because the trees that they have cleaned up now were obviously the ones that were causing big travel hazards at first, trees that were on houses, the big important ones. Now they're starting to clean up parks that have just been completely destroyed and things like that. And now you drive around and there's trees with all these orange spray painted X's on them. The arborists and city planners have gone around to almost the entire city and have marked trees that are still standing, whether or not they're safe or not, because of the damage that they withstood. So although maybe they're still standing, the tree limbs could be damaged, or the actual internal part of the tree that keeps it structurally sound is damaged, and those trees are going to have to be cut down and removed because they can't be standing anymore, because in an instance you get a regular severe thunderstorm, you get a gust, that tree would go down because it's just not stable enough to be safe anymore. And so in my mind, they've been cleaning up debris for 6 months, and there's still more trees that have to be cut down. There's still forests that haven't been touched at all because they're not really impacting anybody right now. But there's still, the forest across the street from me, there's still trees down everywhere. It's not impacting anybody because it's a large field.
Sure.
But I see that every single day, and it's a reminder that this is something we're all still dealing with 6 months later. I remember for months, a couple months after the derecho, every day I drove into work, no matter what road you drove on, there was huge piles of trees and sticks in front of everybody's yards from cleanup, all along the roads, every road in Cedar Rapids. It didn't matter where you went. And it's one of those things where you talked about a tornado can have winds like that, but tornadoes hit very isolated areas. They hit, a certain neighborhood, or they hit a certain town. This storm impacted an entire county,
right?
Almost. This also impacted Iowa City, not as much as here in Cedar Rapids, but it still impacted them quite a bit. And this is something that is not going to be done being dealt with anytime soon. And the other thing that you have to think about is because all these trees were so old, it's going to take a while to replace all of them.
Sure.
You plant new trees, it's going to take hundreds of years to get the tree canopy to be back. And from the last thing I had heard, we had lost more than 50% of our tree canopy here in the city of Cedar Rapids.
Wow. Whoa. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
And like I said, I mean, the cleanup's not done. They're still going to have to cut down a lot of trees, and I wouldn't be surprised if that adds up to more than 75% of the tree canopy in the city. And that's significant. It's extremely significant. And I think this is one of those events that, a lot of people who maybe didn't know about it because it wasn't something that was focused on. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something that was told. And we were living in it, and people didn't know about it because we didn't have communications to get out. They weren't covering it, outside of what we were trying to do, which was hard to broadcast because, our towers were down. Our satellites had been damaged on the top of our station. It was hard to even get a broadcast out. And it was crazy to think that we were surviving this extreme natural disaster that was comparable to hurricane damage, and just nobody knew about it.
Right.
Unless you knew somebody here. You really didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's people who lost their entire homes. I think about a month or two ago, I watched a house get torn down on a major road that I drive every day to go to the grocery store. And I watched this house get torn down, and you just think like that's where someone built their life.
Sure.
That's maybe where they had kids. That's where their family lived. That's where all their things were. And now, the house is unlivable. And that's how a lot of houses now are in Cedar Rapids, because the damage they withstood, their houses were deemed unlivable, and they haven't been able to go in them since.
Do you think
we know someone at my station, and he's having to live in a rental house for over a year until they can fix his house.
Wow.
Which is just crazy.
That is. Do you think, just kind of piggybacking off of that, and I've found in my own experience, that maybe sometimes the general public does not take severe thunderstorm warnings as seriously as tornado warnings. Do you think that was that a thing on that day? Because obviously I'm sure there was damage. I mean, looking at just some of the historical perspective, this was doing some damage already in western and central Iowa before it kind of got to you guys. Do you think people kind of took it seriously? Or
I would say, in a general sense, people don't take severe thunderstorm warnings as seriously as tornado warnings, mm-hmm. which is unfortunate. Right. And I think a lot of times, the reason why that is because we do get a lot issued during severe weather season. And that's no fault to anybody. We just get severe storms. Some just aren't as bad as others. Right. Sometimes you just get, some small hail. Sometimes you get large hail. Mm-hmm. Sometimes maybe you get a couple gusts of winds that, blow your patio furniture over. Right. But that's it. That's all that happens. Maybe a few shingles blow off your roof. It's not a big deal a lot of the times. And so I think it's the, what people think mentally is, oh, well, the last time there was a severe thunderstorm warning, my plastic chair just flew across the yard and it wasn't a big deal. Mm-hmm. So it's probably not a big deal because people just associate things with memories that they've personally experienced. So until you've personally experienced it, that's what you think. We also had some major hailstorms last year. So people, associated severe thunderstorm warnings with always large hail for a while because it was every time we were getting severe thunderstorms, it's like, oh, are we going to get that large hail again? And so it's all about perspective on people. And I do think a lot of times people do take tornado warnings more seriously because they know what tornadoes do, because that's something that is widely known. You think about tornadoes that have happened nationally, like the Dayton, Ohio tornado or Nashville or things like that. That was covered so well. About the damage that tornadoes do. But not always do severe thunderstorm warnings or derechos or things like that get, as much attention a lot of times because it's not that trigger word, which is tornado. Mm-hmm. People don't know what a derecho is. People, don't always understand straight line winds. They don't always understand the terminology, but everybody knows what a tornado is. And so I think that's a lot of the disconnect. And I know this upcoming severe weather season is going to be difficult for a lot of people in Cedar Rapids because it's going to bring back a lot of memories of the derecho of every time a severe thunderstorm warning is going to be issued. Is it going to be another derecho?
Right.
Is that going to happen again? Like, are we going to be without power for another week? Like, those are thoughts that are going to go through people's minds. It's thoughts that are going to go through my mind because it's something we all experienced here. And the good news is, this could have caused a lot of fatalities. And I know at least here in Cedar Rapids, we only had one. And for such a devastating system, for how much damage it did, I think we are extremely lucky as a community that there was only one fatality.
Yes.
And one is always too many.
Yes.
One is always too many. And it always, tears on you as a meteorologist because you're always like, well, could I have done something more? Could I have messaged differently? Things like that. Obviously, you can't go down the rabbit holes. You got to just be confident in what you did.
Right.
But for this type of destruction to only have one, I thought was incredible. I thought we were going to, go weeks out from it and you were going to find all this other stuff. And the numbers were just going to pile up. And they just didn't, which was, a good thing when you think about it. It was just, all the cubic square meters of damage across the city. It was how many houses are deemed unlivable. Those were the numbers that started piling up. And then, of course, obviously the wind speeds that started to get reported afterwards. And then they started to do damage reports, and that's when they were able to estimate wind gusts of upwards of 140 miles per hour and things like that. And so I know one of our big messages last year, especially after this, and it's going to be a big message this year, is always take all these warnings super seriously.
Right.
It doesn't matter if it's a severe thunderstorm warning. It doesn't matter if a derecho is coming. It doesn't matter if a tornado is coming. There's a reason why that warning's being issued. There's a reason why, the sirens are going off. There's a reason why watches are issued. There's reason why we have severe thunderstorm outlooks. There's all reasons for this. And it's the only way you can keep yourself safe is by staying informed and staying informed constantly with changing weather. Because it can change as quickly from Sunday night to Monday morning.
Right.
Because that's what happened here. And if you were somebody who maybe only watched Sunday night and didn't watch Monday morning, you may not have gotten all the information. But that's
right.
just how quickly weather can change. And a lot of people, criticize, the market and the meteorologists here saying it came without warning. And it may have not gotten warning of a couple days in advance, but there were watches out a few hours before. We saw the damage happening in Des Moines. We saw it happening in Marshall County and Marshalltown, which is just outside of our viewing area. We saw it move into Tama, which is just west of us. We saw it coming, and we did the best that we could to cover it with the resources that we had. And again, the problem is the power outages.
Right.
The power went out in the middle of it, and when you don't have power and you don't have cell phone service, you're literally in the dark. You can't get information at that point, and that's when you just have to hope that everything's going to be okay at the end of it. And I was in the dark as well. I was actually able to get a phone call out to my mom, and I asked her to look at the radar for me.
Right.
Because I said, Mom, I need to know when this is going to end because I don't know what to do. I'm just sitting here. I have no information, and I don't know when this is going to end. Is it going to end in 5 minutes? And it went on for over an hour, and it felt like it was never going to end. And that sounds dramatic, but it truly never felt like it was going to end.
Well, I think it's hard. It's hard for people to put this in perspective. Like you said, it did get some coverage, but if I remember correctly, on a national perspective, it may have gotten coverage for a couple of days, but in terms of the extent of damage that happened where you're at, it was basically maybe a day or 2 day story, and then it wasn't a story anymore. It was still a story for you, but it wasn't really a big national story anymore for whatever reason they decided that.
It wasn't, and it's not a knock on national media. That's not
right.
my point here, but it wasn't covered nationally. And I remember from what I was able to see on Tuesday, they mentioned Chicago a lot because Chicago is also in the path of this derecho,
right?
Which is great. Chicago also got quite a bit of damage. They
Sure.
lost power. They were back with power within a day. And the fact that we're seeing here in Cedar Rapids, all of us here still without power, some of us for weeks, and that's the only coverage that we really saw. It was pretty much, it hit Iowa, really hit Chicago, and then went into Indiana. And like you said, it was a day, maybe two, and it was the end of the news cycle for us. And we were still in it. And I mean, 2 days later, we were just getting communication towers back. They brought in mobile communication towers for cell phones to be able to work because they couldn't repair the towers right away. So they had mobile centers trying to get cellular service to people here to be able to get calls out. There were people who couldn't even get calls out to their family to see if they were okay for days. And we were truly living in an extreme disaster, and it felt like nobody was listening. Nobody was hearing what we were dealing with. And at the same time, there were major hurricanes hitting the coast as well that was getting coverage for days. Which, again, granted, that's also a major disaster. Louisiana got hit with multiple hurricanes this past season for a record-breaking season at that. I'm not bashing that by any means, but we were living in our own disaster here.
Right.
And it just didn't feel like anybody knew about what we were dealing with. And like you said, the extent of the damage. I mean, the fact that every corner of the city of Cedar Rapids was damaged, I just don't think that message was really relayed very well. And I think if people visited Cedar Rapids today, you would still be able to see the extent of the damage 6 months from there. You can drive past and see where all the trees used to be. You can see where there are apartment complexes where the second floors got completely blown off, and those haven't been touched yet. It's almost like a time capsule of the derecho, because there's just some stuff that hasn't been able to be dealt with yet. And now you bring the winter season on top of it, and it just slows things down. I mean, now we're dealing with record amounts of snow across the area.
Right.
And people who have damage to their roofs. People are getting snow inside their houses now because of the damage to their roofs from the derecho, because trying to get contractors out to be able to fix these things is months wait because everybody needs it. And it's just trying to get the resources. I know just a couple of days ago, we were talking about auto body repair shops because we had some crashes with winter weather. They said it's an 8 to 9 month wait to get any cars fixed, combined from the hailstorms that we saw and the derecho, and now winter weather.
Wow.
8 to 9 months to get cars just repaired from all these damages. And these are things, it keeps piling on. We've dealt with natural disasters, and just on top of regular normal weather this year, it's just continuing to wreak havoc on the people who live here. And I think to some people it seems never ending. Many people who saw hail damage got damage from the derecho, and there could be the same people who are now dealing with issues because of winter weather because of those damages. And so it does seem like it's a never-ending battle, which, again, it hurts your heart to see it, because we're still doing stories on people about it. And that whole week afterwards, we just kept finding all these people that needed help, and we were trying to help as many people as we could. Our phones were ringing off the hook about retirement facilities, apartment complexes, houses. People couldn't find resources, and we can only do so much. And we just felt like we were constantly failing because everybody needed help and we could only do so much. And it's a hard feeling when it seems like everybody needs help and you can't help everybody.
Right. Well, it's an incredible, I mean, I know it kind of, unfortunately, like you said, it did get put in the afterburner after just the year that 2020 was, the pandemic, the most active hurricane season in the Atlantic on record. You mentioned the record-breaking landfalls in Louisiana, and then you had this. It's just it's one of those things. God willing, you're going to go through significant. In your long meteorological career, you're going to go through more significant events. But God willing, this will be the most significant, because this, like I said at the beginning, this is a generational type of event. You don't see I mean, derechos can happen every so often, but the duration of wind speed and the wind speed, the velocity that came out of that's just unheard of. And you described the devastation. I mean, here you are 6 months later, and it's like, it still looks like it was only a few weeks ago. So it's tough.
Yeah, and I hope this is a once in career storm.
Right.
I would really hate to see something like this happen again. Whether obviously if I was here or living somewhere else, it is just something that is so mind boggling that even to today, I mean, sometimes you think back to it and you wonder, like, how did we all get through that?
Right.
How did we get through not being able to communicate, or people couldn't get off their streets out of their homes because there was trees everywhere. Obviously, I still had to get to work. We had to cover it.
Right.
Some days I wonder how I got to work every day.
Right.
Sometimes because there were routes I just had to avoid for weeks because it took them, so long. They tried to get major roads and interstates and things like that cleared first. And one of the things that we talked about as a station was, when you have natural disasters like this, there's normally like a few people who get impacted, in your direct group of people that you either work with, and things like that. Every single person at my station was impacted by this. Every single person that I know, that I see, doctors, chiropractors, hairstylists, people at the grocery store. I mean, everybody that I have talked to has been impacted by this storm. And I think that's something that speaks volumes to the extent of the damage. You can't talk to a single person who lived in Cedar Rapids on August 10th of 2020 who didn't get impacted by this in some shape or form.
That's unbelievable.
Now, obviously, some people worse than others, but you can't talk to a single person who lived here on that day who didn't sustain some sort of damage from that. And again, it's one of those things that people will never forget, ever.
Well, Kalie, I don't want to take. We've talked for an hour. I could probably talk to you for like 2 hours on all this.
I could talk for weeks on
I'm
this
sure.
topic. That I have done so much research on it. I've gone back and looked at forecasts like you can't even imagine. It's probably almost bad how much I've looked at. So,
yeah.
But it's something like I said, I'm always learning. I love learning. I love learning about the weather, and I just want to understand. And that's one thing we've done as a weather team is just try to understand what happened.
Right.
And be able to learn from this event. Not just people, but us as a weather team as well, learn from it. That's what you can do with every type of system, and that's what we're going to do this upcoming severe weather season. We're going to have to adapt to our viewers this year because there are a lot that are going to be extremely sensitive to severe weather this year, and we have to account for that. So it's learning, and that's one thing why I chose weather was because it's always changing, it's always different, and it's always evolving. And like I said, I hope I don't have to learn from another system like this, but it's an event that changes your career and kind of makes you step back and think about things.
Sure.
And the fact that I've had to learn so quickly isn't always a bad thing. I experienced a lot of severe weather before this, but I think all of that kind of led me up to this point, and I was able to, do the best that I could with it. Our entire team was able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's all you can do with these types of events. And we just continue to recover as a city. And it's been really nice to be able to see the community come together. And I think that's what kind of makes it good.
Yes.
Is to see all the good that comes from it.
That's right.
All the disaster and things like that, how people can make good out of the disaster. And so that's just what I think a lot of people have learned.
All right, Kalie, we're going to let you go. Before I do, if people want to reach out to you on the social medias, where can they find you?
So if anybody wants to contact me on social media, so I have my Twitter account and my Instagram is at Kalie, Kalie, and then my last name, which is Pluchel, which people say is difficult, but it's P as in Paul, Luchel, and then WX on the end, stand for weather. And then my Facebook page is just Kalie Pluchel, KCRG, so my station letters. So, like I said, I've got a whole lot of information about derechos, so I guess if anybody has any questions, I probably have some sort of information.
Reach out to her. All right. Kalie, thank you so much. You're the best.
Yep, no problem.
My thanks to Kalie Pluchel of KCRG Television, that's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, for her time and just kind of reflecting back on that Derecho day in August across Iowa, which was just, as you heard from her, devastating. I think some interesting numbers here just to kind of put a neat bow on everything. Between August 10th and 13th, this comes from the Weather Service page, by the way. 1.9 million customers were affected by 1.4 million maximum simultaneous outages, 759,000 in Illinois, 585,000 in Iowa, 283,000 lost power here in the state of Indiana, mainly in northern Indiana, and 345,000 in other states. 3 days after the derecho, over 100,000 customers in Illinois and 200,000 in Iowa remained without power. That was 3 days. 3 days after the event. So again, just kind of shows the damage that did to the infrastructure out there. And I think probably something we didn't talk a whole lot about too is just the, and I know Kalie kind of touched on a little bit, but the crop damage was just significant. If you want to go to the Weather Services page, you look up the derecho for August in Iowa. They've got some before and after pictures of where the crop was in the state of Iowa prior to the event, and then after it was a significant drop. So, yeah, that did a lot of damage. And as Kalie said, we're now past the 6-month anniversary, and they're still cleaning up, and they're probably still going to be cleaning up even through this winter. And the problem is, too, is they've had a pretty rough winter in central and eastern Iowa. It hasn't been easy. They've had a lot of snow up there. They've had some pretty big blasts of cold. They've had it worse than we have here, for sure, especially in terms of the snowfall. So that obviously is kind of hindering the cleanup efforts as well. So our thoughts go out to our friends out in Iowa as they continue the cleanup process. And here's hoping to a quieter spring and summer for our friends out west. That's going to do it for us here on Weather Weekly. We've got a lot of good episodes down the pipe as we're going to get more to a regular schedule here as we start rolling into March and beyond, as we get more fully staffed. We're looking forward to it. Not sure on a date yet, but one of my next guests is going to be a good friend of mine, former coworker. His name is Cody Murphy. He's a meteorologist now in Nashville, and we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of the tornado that ripped through downtown Nashville. It's hard to believe that was a year ago. And he was working that night, and so we're going to get his perspective on how that night played out, that overnight strong tornado event in downtown Nashville. So we're hoping to get with Cody very soon, and I hope to bring that to you here on this podcast here, Weather Weekly. We love having you. If you have any comments, you can always share those along with our social media platforms at Marcus Bailey Weather on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we hope you follow all of our great podcasts here at Wish TV and the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com, and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.